let's move on to one of our first guests for the show. This first guest has spent the past couple of days at his conference right here in New York City discussing the pros and cons of tech revolution.
Yeah, there are many in that on that front. Eric Schnurer, is that how you say it?
Yeah, pretty good.
Pretty good. Not an easy name.
Most people just call me Eric.
Eric. Okay. Hey, Eric, the founder of the Greater Good Initiative, is here to tell us all about it.
Welcome, Eric.
Well, it's great to be here.
Great
Thanks
to
for
have
having
you.
me.
So speaking of great, tell us about the work you do through the Greater Good Initiative.
Sure. Well, it started rather inadvertently as what's now a series of conferences, and this is the second year. And we're working at turning this into something that will be a nationwide conversation that will be both live in the analog world and also taking in digital technologies, basically to get Americans talking about how the world we're going to live in the 21st century is going to be very, very different, and how can they best make a difference in that changing environment.
And really, does it center around how we can leverage technology for good? Because a lot of people focus on, these devices, and this show that people are watching right now is distracting, but there are so many, that's not the nice side.
I'm sure it's not distracting.
No, but the nicer side of technology and really the solutions that it offers for our everyday lives.
It's not so much about how you can use technology, although we do talk about that, as much as how technology is changing a lot of things about the world and what the implications of that are, and then how we can and should react to that in order to make a difference.
So let's talk about the conference.
Sure.
It just happened this past week.
So it was Wednesday and Thursday.
Wednesday, Thursday. You had a high-profile speaker, Emma Bloomberg,
Yes.
as part of the conversation. What was that topic? And
well, we actually had a lot of high-profile speakers, I'd like to think. But Emma and I kind of co-chaired the final panel of the conference, which was kind of a replication of something we did at the first conference that I thought was really the highlight both years, which was, we did have a number of high-profile speakers from the journalism world, from the political world, from the academic world, from the tech world. But the last segment each year has been a series of student social entrepreneurs, kids who are out there trying to solve a problem. And what's interesting to me, well, there's a lot of things that are interesting about it, but the underlying thing is that they're kind of combining business, nonprofit, and politics and government into one thing, where they're trying to do something good that's also economically self-sustaining. So it's a different model from what you've seen in the past, where there's a clear difference between business and nonprofit, or between doing good or just looking out for the bottom line. I think this generation is much more focused on combining all of those things into how they can make the world function better. And we had a half dozen kids between the ages of 20 and 30 talking about ventures they've started all over the world to do that. Emma, of course, is a well-known philanthropist and social venturer herself here in New York. And so we spent a little bit of time talking about her work and what the implications of that are for social ventures and for philanthropy, and then brought on the students to talk about the work that they're doing.
Isn't that interesting? The world has changed so much, because back not too long ago, it was very much private sector and public sector.
Yes.
The public sector was focused on impact, and the private sector was focused on bottom line. And now we have these social entrepreneurial ventures, which are kind of a mix of both. And they're looking to solve problems through private enterprise, because it's become painfully apparent that government can't solve all our problems.
Yes, and I think that's the origin of this whole Greater Good Initiative, that technology is really blurring the line between public sector and private sector, and as it's blurring lots of lines. And there's a lot of lines that existed in either-ors that are disappearing in the 21st century, and we started this initiative and this conference to focus on how that's happening, what the implications are, and if you want to make an impact on the world, how can you best do that? And as you said, some of it's what you would have thought of before as business, some of it's nonprofit, some of it's politics and government, but it's really all of those things rolled into one in a very different way.
in discussing the pros and cons of technology, looking at the larger conversations happening at the conference, tell us 3 pros and 3 cons.
Of technology?
I'm sure there is a long list, Eric, but let's narrow it down.
You're putting our guests on the spot over here, Lindsay.
Yeah.
We got 1 minute to do this.
Sure. Just some top line conversations about what's working and what's not working.
Sure. Well, let me tell you the basic thesis that was really the focus of this year's conversation. I'll try to give you a couple specifics on that. But basically, if you think back to, say, 20 years ago when the internet was new, it was the panacea that was going to solve all of our problems, right? The 80-year-old shut-in who never went anywhere was going to have friends thanks to technology bringing us all together, right? Truth was going to prevail because you'd have all the world's information at your fingertips, so you could, in a split second, figure out what the absolute truth was because you could sort through all information. And, of course, we'd all get along as a result of that, and we'd kind of meld into one great hive mind that had the solutions to every problem. Now, 20 years later, what most people think is, it's destroying friendships and relationships. It's destroying truth. You can't find out what's true because now there's a million different truths at your fingertips, and our politics are tearing us apart, and nobody can agree on anything. So it's a total disaster. I think the answer is probably somewhere in between, as with most things, and the question is how can you arrive at the best synthesis of that and to take the advantages of technologies and then social changes and deal with the problems that are being confronted. And one of the big issues, to get a little specific, I don't want to talk too long, but one of the obvious things is privacy and data protection, and the availability of data on just about everything allows companies and politicians and governments and all kinds of entities to figure out how to do a lot of things better, including delivering things that you want. It also tears down walls of privacy in ways that make people uncomfortable. It enables both businesses and politicians to pitch you on things that you don't necessarily want and manipulate your behavior. And so there's pluses and minuses to everything, and the list could go on and on.
Well, you eloquently answered my question.
That was
Thank you.
a great 30-second, quick update on everything, on our present reality.
Yeah, and then we spent, 36 hours discussing it all.
Right. There's a long, technology is ever evolving. 10 years from now, where do you think it's headed, Eric? What are some advances that you think will come out of some of these conversations you're having now?
I just think we need to do a couple of hour-length shows on that. Where is that going? Well, there's a couple of things. It's and as I said, I think it's a blend, and it's a matter of if we can make a choice of which way we go. There's a lot of people that think that this technology is leading us towards authoritarianism and lack of choice. And it's kind of both at the same time. Technology gives people a huge amount of choice, the ability to opt out of systems and opt into other systems at their own choosing, which means that there will be a lot less of mandatory behavior, whether we're talking about government or as consumers. But it also, as we were just talking about a minute ago, it gives those that can amass the data and those that can amass the means of communication a higher ability to persuade, with persuasion tipping over into some other things. How we balance that in the next 10 years is really going to determine the fate of our country, the fate of our society, and the fate of the world over the course of the next half century, and the lifetimes of most of your viewers and of the kind of young people we had on the panel yesterday.
Wow.
Ooh.
Woof.
Woo.
So that's
Technology. This could be a
Eric.
full show just on the Greater Good Initiative, right?
Yes.
And everything that's
at least
happening.
That's why
under
we
the
have a conference, at least, and we hope to
Right.
enlarge it into conversations all over the country.
More questions for you?
No, we're good, Eric.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us and
thank you
filling
for
us
having
in
me.
on what's happening at their Greater Good Initiative
Sure.
conference.
Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.